To be old and wise, one must first be young and stupid. And nobody knows this better than I do. And that's why I crack these books out here. Because like normally, I don't like old photo albums. You know, I don't like looking at the past at all, to tell you the truth. I'm always like looking towards the future. But like, you know, because photo albums are like, they're full of dead people and dead pets and like, you know, things you really want to kind of like put behind you. And a lot of this stuff with the cars is stuff I want to put behind me. But I figured, you know, for you younger guys that are just like, you know, this is so overwhelming. How do I learn all that stuff? How do I become like, you know, like Uncle Tony, you know, where I know all this shit? Well, you know, it's a painful learning curve. It's a long journey. And I could show you here with we could take a brief tour through my history. So the first thing you got to know is back during the 1980s, middle 1980s, I was in my early 20s. And I had a career, an accidental career as an automotive journalist. And I did really well with it. My own personal cars were limited to just like street race stuff, you know. The cars that were common in the day. And but I always had a thing for fuel cars. I always had a thing for Nitro. It was like from the time I was a baby. You know what I mean? Like just, there's something about them. Especially Slingshot Dragsters. And I'm going to do a video at some point called, get ready for this one, it's called Sex in a Slingshot Dragster. And I'm going to do some, right? But we're going to do that another time. But I always had a thing for Slingshot Dragsters. So make a long story short, while I'm doing my street racing thing and my magazine thing, I've got this burning desire to go Nitro racing. And during the time, Nitro racing, it was just coming off what they called the Star Wars tune-up days, right? These things were lean and mean, and at the time, Nitro wasn't really quite understood. So people were trying to make power off the top of the stroke instead of the bottom of the stroke. So these things were out there at like 70 degrees of lead, 100% in the tank, 2-speed transmissions, like 430 gears, and they were just like mean, violent, right? I'll tell you when I felt when I like the hook was set, right? I remember I was about 16, 17. I was going through the pits at a funny car race at Englishtown, and I'm watching them work on the cars. And when they pulled the plugs out, you know, they put the plugs in a rack so you could, you know, do your tune-up. The spark plugs didn't resemble a spark plug. They were completely annihilated. Like there was no ground strap, there was no center electrode, there was nothing. It was just obliterated. And I was like, I love this. You know, this is like, you know, this is it, right? I got to do this. So let's go with these. Let's look at some of these pictures here, and I can give you the course of my evolution, right? And some of the hard lessons that I learned along the way. So here, come around here, Kat. So it started innocently enough with this Roadrunner. So this thing here, and I had a bunch of cars, but this was going to be my street race car, okay? And we were poor, we had no money, right? But I wanted to build like, you know, a solid like 10-second Hemi car, right? So what I did was, I built, I'm gonna go to this picture. Yes, okay. So I built this. So this was a 1/2-inch stroker, 426 Hemi. Built this thing on a shoestring. I mean, like literally, right? Like, you know, scrounging parts and buying junk but I eventually put it together. And, you know, it ran okay. Didn't run really good, but it ran okay. I didn't really understand tuning Hemis or anything like that. And I actually blew this cross-frame manifold in half at some point. But at any rate, I said to myself, this is like towards the end of my magazine days, I was like, you know what, I gotta go drag racing. I need a Slingshot Dragster. So what I did was, I bought a 1967 Woody Gilmore Flexi Flyer. And here's the car right here. I was at a shop in the garage. And I pulled this motor out of the Roadrunner, and I stuck it in there. And I added a set of aluminum heads and a set of Hillborn injectors. And again, see, I was in my early 20s, and late 20s rather, and I was broke. At the time, I had 2 kids. We lived in New York City. It was like every extra penny I could make went into this thing. So here's what happened with this. I had never messed with Hillborn fuel injection before. So I bought this at a swap meet. I think I paid like $100 for the whole setup, right? And I was going to run this thing on gasoline. So I put it all together, and first time I fired it in the garage, right, it ran great. It ran fantastic. But here's the thing that it's like a reoccurring theme in my life, and it's a reoccurring theme in like the learning curve of doing this stuff. What you don't know, or I should say is, what you don't know is how much you don't know. So I put this thing together, and remember, like I said, I'm like, I got 2 kids. I'm broke, right? So for me to go to the track, I didn't even own a trailer. I had to borrow a trailer. So for me to go to the track, it was a big deal. I was only able to do this a couple of times a year. What I didn't understand, what I didn't know about the Hillborn fuel injection system at the time, was that you can't shut it off with the ignition. If you shut it off with the ignition, the fuel that's in the lines will drip down into the cylinders. So when you go to restart the motor, it's flooded. So what happened was, I'd start this thing, put it through its paces at the house, right? Everything ran fucking perfect. It was great. And as soon as I would take it to the track, we'd warm it up at the track. I'd throw a fresh set of plugs in, warm it up at the track, then tow around to the staging lanes. And when I'd go to make a run, the car wouldn't start. I'd crank it, open the throttle, which even made things worse because it was wet with fuel. It was drenched with fuel. I didn't realize what was going on, right? This is my first experience with this. So after 2 or 3 times of going through this, like where it's just total embarrassment. Like, this car's got everything it needs to make power, right? So, why can't even get this thing to start? It won't do a burnout or anything like that. I finally called Gene Adams over at Hillborn, and I says, what's going on? So we went back and forth, and he finally says, do you have a fuel shutoff on that thing? I says, no. He says, that's your problem. Put a fuel shutoff on it and you won't have any problem. Just don't shut it from the ignition, shut it from the fuel. So we did that. So now we save up the money, we borrow a trailer, we get to the track again, and warm up the car, shut it off with the fuel. Now this is awesome. I take it out, start the car, whoom, lights right off. I pull up to go do the burnout, I hit the gas, it just flies, the tires just blow themselves off. This is awesome, right? Back up, and I'd never even driven anything like this before, but it was like, you know what, I didn't care, I was young and like reckless, right? Back up, right? Tree turns green, I hit the throttle, and this thing just goes for a moonshot, right? All I'm seeing now is like stars and spoked wheels up, in the air, right? So, whoo, I grab the brake and the front end slams down and I break the front end of the car. Actually, this thing went up so hard and so high, so fast that when the back end of the car hit the ground, because your ass is only a few inches from the ground on those cars, it actually smacked my ass, right? Got me right in the tailbone. What the hell is this all about now, right? People tell me, oh, you got to put a wheelie bar on it. You got to put a wheelie bar on it. And I'm like, now I'm looking at pictures of these cars from the day, when they were in use, 1967 through 1971. And it was after the slipper clutch came in, so they were hooked up, right? And none of them had wheelie bars. I'm like, why doesn't these cars didn't need wheelie bars back in the day? Why do they need wheelie bars now? I puzzle over this for forever, right? Because the aesthetic. I don't want to put wheelie bars on this car. I'm going to make it work the way it's supposed to make. So I call up, I track down Woody Gilmore, the guy who actually built the car. And at the time he was working at California Street Rods. And he didn't want to talk about dragsters because I was like, this is behind me. I don't want to deal with it. And now that I'm older, I can relate. I don't want to deal with the shit, right? So anyway, Woody says, after I explained to him what happened, he says, you don't have enough power in that car. And I took this as an insult. I'm like, bro, this is like 600 horsepower. This is like it's a 484 inch Hemi, aluminum heads, dart heads, injector. He says, no, you don't have enough horsepower. You're not able to drive over the center of gravity. That's what keeps the front end down, not wheelie bars. Oh, okay. All right, so you know what? I get it. This makes sense. I need more horsepower. So this is around 1988. And now I'm starting to see things in magazines. There's a couple of guys out in California. And remember, I'm in New York City. But I see there's a couple of guys in California that are running nostalgia top fuel cars. Only there weren't nostalgia top fuel cars. It was like they were just taking 20-year-old top fuelers and running them for shits and giggles at places like Palmdale and whatnot. I said, I'm going to do that, right? So I take my injected motor out and I says, I'm going to build a blown fuel 392, like these guys do, early Hemi. So I go out and I find all of this early Hemi stuff and I build. Uh-oh, where is it? I lost it. Oh, wait, okay. I built this thing. So same car, 170 inch Woody Gilmore Flexi Flyer, and I built this 392. Okay, and I did this textbook by the book exactly the way they would have done it in 1967, like every single part, every single thing, because that's what the guys in California were doing. This was before there was any sort of nostalgia top fuel thing, but I had to have this. So I said, okay, Woody Gilmore says I don't have enough power in the car. I'm going to make enough power in this car. So I put this whole thing together, and pay attention to these lines right here, because this is part of the learning curve also, and it happened way after the fact. So anyway, I put this thing together, and I had never, now, okay, this is something I have to understand. At the same time that I'm doing this, right, I'm also learning the ropes working on other people's Nitro cars. I started off as a helper, I graduated to mechanic, and my dream was to be a tuner. I wanted to be a tuner, right? So I threw my whole life into that. And this was just kind of like a side project, like this was my own toy, right? So I put this thing together. And the first time I go to start it, on gasoline, I use a squirt bottle on the injector, right? It lights immediately. It sounds exactly perfect, like every other fuel car I've ever heard on the warm-up, right? I only had a tiny bit of nitro. I had like maybe a half a gallon of nitro. So I turned on the fuel. It didn't quite sound the way I was expecting to, and I says, well, it's just because I don't have enough fuel in there. I have an auto parts store down the street from me. And I says, you know what? Bring that thing down. We'll buy you nitro. Light it off in the parking lot. So I says, okay, great. Let's do this. So they give me $100. I'll buy 5 gallons of nitro. And we bring it down to the parking lot. And we're gonna light this thing. We're gonna cackle it in the parking lot, right? So got the nitro in it. Uncle Kathy, used to put Uncle Kathy in the car to warm it up. There she is, getting ready to get in the car, right? And this is what I look like with short hair and no beard when I was like 28 or so. So at any rate, first time we're going to go cackle this car, warm it up on the squirt bottle, switch over to the nitro, and I'm expecting this thing to go like it's supposed to, but it doesn't. It doesn't get loud, right? It just kind of like it's just sitting there going on nitro. What's going on here? Then it starts like popping and backfiring up through the blower. What's going on? I shut it off, restart it, same thing. We spend like the whole day trying to figure out what's going on with this thing. All right, so here's learning curve number 2. I knew how to build the engine, I knew how to plumb it, I knew all of those things, but I didn't know how to set the barrel valve. And I set it intuitively. When you look at the barrel valve on these things, there's a little fang, and that little fang is what it's supposed to idle off of. On alcohol, on nitro, it has to be much bigger than that. It has to be a much bigger gap. So what I did was I pushed the head gasket out. All right. Again, I don't know this yet though. Now I have an opportunity to take this thing to the track. So we're gonna bring it to ATCO. And we're gonna run it at ATCO. So I put it, stop growling, baby. She's growling at the chickens in the yard. So we bring it to ATCO. And I still haven't corrected my mistake. I just figured to push out a head gasket. Put another head gasket in it, bring it to ATCO, go to start it. It does exactly the same thing. And it pushes out a head gasket again. Pop, 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 pop. It's what you don't know. You know, the things that you don't know. Again, I call Gene Adams over at Hillborn and explain what happened. And he says, shush, Lily. So he says, oh, you're not setting the barrel valve right. He says, you got to set it so that there's the fang and then like maybe 1/8 of an inch underneath the fang, and then it'll be fine. Now you tell me, right? All right. So at the same time that I'm doing this, I learned another lesson, right? If you're going to build something on a budget and you're going to like put yourself all into it, don't build it for any sort of fad or trend. Because as I'm going along with this car, suddenly the front engine top fuel thing, the nostalgia top fuel thing, explodes in popularity, and it gets, you know, the attention of the NHRA, and they start changing rules. Every time they turn around, they change another rule on this car. Now that this thing has to be chassis certified, it has to be teched, so I bring it to get teched, right? And again, for me to do anything at this time on my own, I had to save for weeks and borrow a trailer just to get this thing off of Staten Island, right? I go and get it teched. He says, nope, won't pass. The way the frame is constructed, the breakaway joint is behind the motor plate instead of in front of the motor plate. This won't go. No way. All right, fine. You know what? I want a fuel altered anyway. So I says, all right, so I sold this car and I pulled the motor out and I'm like, you know what? I want a 426. So I go back, I take this engine out of the car and I put it on the side and I start building a blown fuel 426. So that brings us to, there's Uncle Kathy in the car. She used to get in there all the time until it caught fire one time when we were trying to warm it up and she wouldn't get it in anymore. So with that, we build this thing. And I think I have a picture of it. Let me see here. I got a picture of it someplace where we had just all right, maybe it'll turn up. So we built this. And what I did was I bought an old funny car. It was a NHRA chassis. And it had a very weird rear end mounting. So I didn't notice at the time. Just as I'm building this car, the NHRA comes up with spec 10.1b. And 10.1b makes everything that's in this car illegal. So I rebuild the entire thing out back. But when I do it, I say, you know what? I want this thing to sit really, really low, right? I want, you know, I want this to be tight and nasty, right? And you can see here, I mean, look at the profile of this car. That's tight and low. That's about as cool as you can get, right? The only problem is I neglected the fact that, I neglected the fact that I didn't fit in the damn car. Oh, here. Here's a picture of it when I first finished it. Yeah, I built that in a 2-car garage in New York City. Most of it gas welded together. My total investment in that car was about $5,000. So here's a picture of me sitting in the car, and you could see the roll cage. My head is up in the roll cage. I just did not fit the damn thing. And as soon as you hit the throttle with it, I'd go blind because vibration. It would just start shaking and vibrating. You know, it's a normal thing. But, you know, that was it. I couldn't see. And I start over. I have, like, vertigo anyway. So it doesn't take much to, like, knock my balance off. So it was great. You know, I was dizzy and blind and trying to drive a fuel car. It makes a lot of sense. And actually, that was another part of the learning curve. You know, you have to know yourself. And you have to know what you're capable of. So I wanted my NHRA license. Lily, shush. I wanted my fuel card, my NHRA license. Excuse me 1 second. We're doing a video here. We're doing a YouTube video. You have to be quiet. Never mind, I didn't fit the car. We take this thing to ATCO. I line it up so I got 2 licensed drivers that are going to sign off on me. Car runs strong. I mean, like it's 1,000%. It's all there. I go to make my first run. I can't see, right? So you're supposed to make 3 runs. You got to make one's supposed to be just like 100, 200 feet. Then you're supposed to go 1/8 mile, and you're supposed to make a 1/4 mile run. So my first shot, I can't see anything. So the second shot, right? I says, you know what? I got to do something here. So I started making room inside the car. I pulled the fireproof padding off the seat. I had fireproof underwear, and I got rid of that, right? I took all of the padding off the roll cage, and I kept getting in and out of the car, and every time I do something, it would get a little bit easier. I got in the car, and I jumped up and down on the seat to crush the aluminum in a little bit, so my ass would sit down a little lower. So finally, I'm almost there. I'm almost to where I can fit under the roll cage, right? And nobody's looking, right? I got everybody servicing the car. Nobody's looking. So I reached into my helmet, I scooped out the padding from the helmet, I threw it on the other side of my ramp truck, right? Got in the car and I fit perfectly. I said, here we go, right? And this is why I don't belong in fast cars, because you have to know yourself. You have to know yourself. I don't have enough sense. When you put any type of horsepower in front of me, I got no sense. I lose it completely. I just, you know, it's like a sickness and you just need to go. Well, I lose track of common sense. So not only do I have vertigo, I shouldn't be in one of these cars. I'm claustrophobic. I shouldn't be in one of these cars. But then I don't even think, you know, safety. So what happens is I have no padding in my helmet. It's just the roll cage here and the fiberglass shell of the helmet and styrofoam and my skull, right? Well, I go to make my second pass. I got 100% nitro in the tank. I got everything set on kill. I got 68 degrees in the mag. This thing's just like rocket. I get out about 300 feet and the car goes into tire shake. Tire shake is when the tire actually tries to roll over itself. Bang, 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 bang. It was like getting hit in the head with a with a jackhammer. Screwed up my brain big time, right? For a couple of weeks, right? It was just like, it was bad. So anyway, at that point I realized, no, you know what? You should not be driving these cars. As much fun as it is, you shouldn't be in there. You don't belong in there. So I continued on my path, working and tuning with other people's cars, and and it was fine. I was completely content with that. Like the whole thing of driving just left my system at that point. And I had started to really I was starting to get good. I was gaining a reputation. And now I was starting to get paid. I was a paid wrench and I was a paid tuner. And I was getting to travel to all of these different parts of the country and work on all these different cars, and I was making decent money with it. Still I wanted my own, right? So we put this one together. And this one was in Hot Rod Magazine. So this was actually Nasty Dave Benjamin's car, his body, on an old Pluger chassis. And I think we ran this just the one time that it was on Hot Rod Magazine. So I did a story in Hot Rod Magazine in, I think it was the April '97 issue, called A Few Moments in Hell. And it's like what it's like to drive a fuel altered. And this is the car that we used. So, and there's Uncle Kathy cleaning valve covers. And here's a unique picture. I didn't see this until it was in the magazine, right? And have you ever seen the top of your own head? I had never seen the top of my own head. So I'm standing in a 7-Eleven looking at this picture, looking at the magazine with this picture in it, and I noticed this, who's the bald guy working on the car? I was like, holy shit, that's me. So I actually went, I shaved my head after that. And then on the way back from the girl who cut my hair, on the way back from her place, I was like, but wait, why did I do that? I don't really care. So that was, anyway, make a long story short. We ran this car a time or two, and then, I had just come to the end of the Nitro thing. Almost to the end of the Nitro thing. I was still tuning other people's cars. And let's go back to this 392 that I built. Okay, so when I built the 426 for the fuel altered, I saved all of these lines, all of these fuel lines. I scavenged them and I put them on the new car. So this engine sat in the corner of my garage for a couple of years. I sell it to a guy named, don't worry about his name. He's got a top fuel dragster in the Midwest, and I sold it to him. I think I got $6,500 for this motor. And he says it's complete. It's everything. It's plug wires. It's pan to injector. It's magneto. It's plug wires. It's everything you need. Belt, the whole 10 yards. He comes. He drives to New York. He picks it up. He pays me for it. And he's like, "What about the fuel lines?" And he says, I scavenged them for another car. And I gave him a couple $100. I says, just order another set of fuel lines. So now remember, at this time, I had established myself. I was a paid wrench, paid tuner, right? I was doing good for myself. And this guy takes this engine and he goes and he puts it in his car. He's in the Midwest, and I get a phone call a couple days later, and he says, "Blew it up." I says, "What do you mean it blew it up?" He says, "Just fireballed, right?" I says, "Fireballed?" He says, "Yeah, block is broken. I can tell you how many places." Now I go into a panic, right? Because it's like, I got a reputation here. I'm getting paid to run these cars for people. And this guy I just sold him an engine and it's self-destructed. I jump in the car and I run out to where he is in the Midwest to look over this damage, right? I got there, the stuff was like still warm when I got there because my reputation's at stake. I'm in panic mode. So I'm autopsying everything. I'm going over, I'm trying to find the point of failure, because I got to give this guy his money back or I got to do something, right? And then I noticed, I'm looking at the fuel lines. Well, what he did was, he didn't realize that the stainless fuel lines that were used on these cars have a bigger diameter, 90 thousandths of an inch diameter, internal diameter. I'm sorry, 100 thousandths of an inch internal diameter. He used a set of brake lines, right? He went to the auto parts store and he bought a set of brake lines and used brake lines, bent them up, they're beautiful, right? Polished them, they look like stainless, but they were brake lines. And the brake line is only about 60 thousandths inside diameter. So what happened was this thing was dead lean. As soon as he hit the gas, as soon as he hit the throttle, it went dead lean and it hurt itself right off the, right off the starting line. And he legged it because he didn't know what it was supposed to be doing, so he just legged it and eventually it just grenaded itself. So when I pointed that out to him, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, sorry, I should have known. But there again is another example of you don't know how much you don't know. The learning curve is painful. It's excruciating, right? But it's something that you have to go through. And okay, so this was all with Nitro cars and dragsters and funny cars and all this other shit. But it doesn't matter if you're doing stuff like this, or you're just screwing around, you're restoring muscle cars, or you're a street racer, or you're doing imports. Doesn't matter what you're doing. In order to get to the point where you're proficient, where you really know your stuff, you have to make all of these mistakes. You don't know how much you don't know, right? And that's it. Be prepared. If you want to take the journey, the long haul with this car thing, it's going to be painful. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be embarrassing, right? I did it all. I made all the mistakes. I made all the embarrassments, right? I wear this stuff, it's like tattooed to my soul. But that's what makes me like second guess everything, second look everything, be extra cautious before that's how you learn. That's how you pay your dues. I guess that's about it. This was the Olsen Brothers cars. This was driven by a guy named Dale, who just died. I'm not sure what he died from recently, but this was a car that I was involved in. This was a fuel alter that ran out of Toms River, New Jersey. And the neat thing about this picture is like the next frame, if this was a motor drive picture, the next frame would have been this thing upside down. As soon as they launched it, it snapped this axle. The car turned sideways and flipped over. But oh, here's another one. Talk about building on a budget, right? I was building on a budget then too. Okay, so this is the car that was in Hot Rod Magazine, and I needed a windscreen on it of some sort. So if you look here, that's a street sign that I stole and cut and riveted in place. It was like this reflective thing right in the middle of the car. So, all right, there's a trip down memory lane. I think I'm going to shut these books again and look at them, I guess, when I'm on my deathbed. So, I'll see you tomorrow.